The 2024 Singapore Grand Prix will forever be etched in memory, but not for what happened on the track. This time it was the drama off the track that took center stage. In a shocking twist, this race might be the last time we see Daniel Ricciardo behind the wheel, as he hinted at his own replacement before the next weekend's race. But that's not all. Ricciardo's sneaky final lap, which snatched a point from Lando Norris, was done with the championship in mind, leaving McLaren boss Zak furious. Yet the real storm came when FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem stirred up controversy. His push for a ban on drivers swearing over team radio led to a severe backlash, even earning Max Verstappen a community service punishment for his foul language during a press conference. The entire grid erupted in ridicule and fiery debates. Today we're diving deep into the controversy that has even Lewis Hamilton defending Max. Stay tuned for all the drama. The Singapore Grand Prix weekend kicked off with confusion when FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem took a bold stand against drivers using profanity on team radio. His words echoed, "We must separate motorsport from rap music. We're not rappers," dropping F-bombs every minute. This statement quickly sparked controversy, as Lewis Hamilton accused Ben Sulayem of stereotyping. Meanwhile, Max Verstappen and his title rival, Lando Norris, argued that swearing is sometimes just an emotional release in the high-pressure world of dangerous racing. Things escalated when Verstappen, during an official FIA press conference, cursed while describing his car's performance in Baku within 24 hours. He was called in by the stewards and, after a brief 13-minute hearing, received his punishment. The FIA declared that Verstappen's language was coarse, rude, or offensive, violating their regulations. His penalty: community service. Verstappen tried to argue that the language was commonplace for him, but the stewards were having none of it. This decision soon became the talk of the entire weekend. The FIA's decision to punish Verstappen quickly turned into the weekend's hot topic. Drivers openly mocked Ben Sulayem's sudden crusade against swearing, questioning why he chose to focus on driver behavior instead of Formula One management. After all, FOM, responsible for broadcasting the sport, controls which radio conversations are aired. When we hear a driver curse, it's because FOM chose to make it public. By punishing the drivers rather than addressing how FOM handles broadcasts, the FIA seemed to be missing the point. Tensions had already been brewing between Ben Sulayem and FOM, with the president's earlier comments on FOM's valuation causing a rift. His remarks on the $2 billion valuation, calling it ridiculous, did not sit well with FOM. Now, this new controversy only added fuel to the fire. Unsurprisingly, Verstappen was furious. He staged a silent protest during press conferences, offering one-word answers and avoiding the official FIA briefing room altogether. His frustration echoed across the paddock, gaining the support of both drivers and the media alike. Verstappen's rebellion became a symbol of resistance against the FIA's actions. During the post-race interviews, he continued to dodge questions, making his displeasure known. He even hosted an impromptu press conference outside the official FIA room, sending a clear message of defiance. When asked why he decided to protest, Verstappen replied sharply, "Why pretend nothing's wrong when the punishment is absurd?" The media quickly rallied around Verstappen. Italy's Corriere dello Sport praised his stance, calling it a high mark of protest against the FIA's ridiculous penalty. British newspaper The Guardian tore into the FIA, stating that if Verstappen could be penalized for swearing, Lando Norris, who admitted to a near-crash moment in the cool-down room with a curse, should expect a similar punishment. The weekend's events highlighted the ongoing tension between drivers and the governing body. For Verstappen, it was a moment to demonstrate his strength, showing everyone what a true champion spirit looks like in the face of controversy. As the weekend continued, Verstappen's silent protest gained momentum. The media highlighted the incident, criticizing the FIA for what seemed like an unnecessary distraction in one of the most thrilling F1 seasons since 2021. Motorsport.com even commented that Verstappen's defiant response was exactly how a world champion should act when facing absurd punishments. In his unofficial press conference, Verstappen made it clear that he wouldn't back down. "Why would I stay silent when the decision makes no sense?" he stated firmly. The driver's determination echoed through the paddock, with many agreeing that the punishment was over the top. The controversy also brought unexpected support for Verstappen from some unlikely corners. Even his fiercest rival, Lewis Hamilton, called the FIA's move a joke, encouraging Verstappen to escalate his protest. Meanwhile, Oscar Piastri couldn't resist making light of the situation, tweeting his podium celebration using clean language and mocking the FIA's stance on swearing. The jokes didn't stop there. In the cool-down room, Piastri asked Norris how he felt during the near-crash incident, playfully adding, without using any swear words. Of course, Norris couldn't resist swearing in his reply, and when later asked about it, Piastri quipped. Fun was the word he used. Even Charles Leclerc joined in, laughing off the situation by warning himself to watch his language or risk community service with Max. While the jokes provided some comic relief, the issue was far from trivial. Drivers like Hamilton, Norris, and Leclerc openly criticized the FIA's approach, calling it unnecessary and excessive. Media outlets across the world echoed these sentiments, condemning the FIA for focusing on trivial matters instead of the sport itself. Verstappen's frustration was clear. He warned that if the FIA continued pushing pointless agendas, it could affect his future in F1. "I don't want to deal with this nonsense," he stated, hinting that such actions could drive him away from the sport. But the drivers weren't just making jokes, they were gearing up for action. The Grand Prix Drivers Association (GPDA), a union that protects drivers' interests, announced plans to discuss how they would collectively respond to the FIA's decision. GPDA chairman Alex Wurz remarked that while not every driver uses expletives, the penalties for swearing seemed overly harsh. How many lifetime community services would someone like Gunther Steiner serve for using the F-word? Wurz joked, pointing out the inconsistency. He highlighted how the Netflix series covering F1 often broadcasts these moments without issue, questioning why the FIA was suddenly drawing a line. Wurz clarified that the GPDA would first discuss the matter internally and then decide whether to approach the FIA formally. He stated drivers need to be authentic. Of course, their words shouldn't be offensive or discriminatory, but this punishment is simply too severe. The message was clear. The drivers weren't going to let this issue slide without a fight. With Formula One heading into a 3-week break before the American leg of the season, the drivers now had time to plan their response. The weekend's controversy had unified them against the FIA's stance, and the likelihood of a collective protest grew stronger. Mohammed Ben Sulayem, known for positioning himself as a friend of the drivers, now faced the very real prospect of having to backtrack in the face of widespread disapproval. Ben Sulayem's approach has always been to stay deeply involved with the drivers, trying to be seen as both an ally and leader. However, his latest decision put him at odds with nearly everyone on the grid. As the drivers discussed their next move, fans around the world waited in anticipation. Would Ben Sulayem fold under the pressure, or would he double down on his stance? Despite the jokes, the issue raised important questions about the FIA's role and how it handles these situations. The drivers clearly felt their freedom to express emotions was under threat. The next few weeks would be critical in shaping the sport's future. As the dust settled on the Singapore Grand Prix, fans and pundits alike pondered the implications of the FIA's actions. Verstappen's defiance had transformed the controversy into a rallying cry for driver authenticity. Meanwhile, the media continued to criticize the FIA, pointing out that the focus on driver language was detracting from what should be an exhilarating season of racing. If F1 is about intense emotions and passion, one commentator noted, then silencing the driver seems contradictory. Even as the spotlight shifted back to the upcoming races, the tension between the drivers and the FIA remained. Verstappen made his stance unmistakably clear. If the governing body continued with petty rules, it could push him to reconsider his future in the sport. "I'm at a point in my career where I don't want to deal with this nonsense," he firmly stated. The GPDA stood ready to defend their right to self-expression. The idea that drivers would collectively oppose the new regulations wasn't just talk. It was now a matter of when, not if, they would act. The Grand Prix Drivers Association understood that their next steps would set the tone for how drivers' freedom of expression would be handled moving forward. In the following weeks, behind closed doors, they began meticulously planning their response. Some drivers argued for a collective statement, a unified front that would call for the FIA to reconsider its rigid stance on swearing and authenticity. Others suggested more radical action, like boycotting certain FIA-organized press events if their concerns weren't addressed. The tension between the drivers and the FIA highlighted a deeper issue. Was Formula One about maintaining a perfect image, or was it about the raw passion, emotion, and unpredictability that made it exciting? For many, this was about more than just words. It was about respecting the drivers as individuals and allowing them to express the full range of emotions that come with racing at the highest level. Verstappen's frustration symbolized this broader struggle, where drivers felt the governing body was increasingly out of touch with the reality of the sport. Mohammed Ben Sulayem found himself in a delicate position. Known for his hands-on approach, he had always aimed to be seen as both an advocate and enforcer. Now, however, he faced a crisis that could either solidify his leadership or expose his limitations. Many within the paddock whispered that he would need to soften his stance. Otherwise, he risked not only the drivers' backlash but also alienating the fans, who were increasingly vocal in their support of driver authenticity. As the break neared its end, anticipation built. The upcoming race in Austin would be more than just another Grand Prix. It was set to become a stage for the drivers' protest. Fans speculated wildly. Would the drivers don symbolic attire, or would they use their media engagements to publicly challenge the FIA's decisions? Verstappen remained steadfast in his resolve. "I love racing," he said during a recent interview, "but I won't stay in a sport that restricts who I am." His words resonated across the racing world, stirring debates and discussions about the essence of Formula One. Was it merely about technical precision, or was it the unfiltered passion of its competitors that made it truly captivating? In the paddock, an unspoken tension lingered. Even the most seasoned journalists sensed that change was on the horizon. Many believed the FIA would eventually have to yield, at least partially, to the drivers' demands. Ben Sulayem might be forced to rethink his approach to the sport's governance, adopting a stance that balances regulation with the driver's right to express themselves. As the engines roared back to life and the cars lined up in Austin, the air was thick with anticipation. The spotlight wasn't just on the race, but on what would unfold off the track. Would the FIA extend an olive branch, or would the drivers take the unprecedented step of defying their governing body in full view of the world? One thing was certain. The showdown between the drivers and the FIA had only just begun, and the future of Formula One's culture hung in the balance.